Today on Oklahoma Gardening, we are headed east to visit the Tulsa Garden Center. We take a look at the newly restored conservatory and then learn more about their begonia trial. We are harvesting Brussels sprouts at the OSU Student Farm. And Christi is back in the kitchen making zucchini boats. Underwriting assistance for our program is provided by the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing. Oklahoma Gardening is also a proud partner with Shape Your Future, a program of the Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust. Shape Your Future provides resources for Oklahomans to make the healthy choice the easy choice.
I love sharing with you guys the cool things that plants can do. We're back here at the student farm. I want to share with you a tropical plant that you might find in some Oklahoma landscapes. It's important to know which plants we are dealing with so that we can continue to maintain them successfully for years to come. Today we're here at the Tulsa Garden Center inside the Historical Conservatory, and joining me is Briana Hefley-Shepard, who is the communications manager here at the Tulsa Garden Center. And Briana, I know this kind of been your pet project over the last couple of years, right?
Yeah.
Talking about the renovation, and I'm sure you did some archive digging to find out a little bit about the history of this place. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the conservatory is turning 100 this year. It was built in 1924 by the Hull family, which was the second family to live in the mansion. Lina Jane was the wife, and she had this commissioned at this Lord and Burnham Conservatory and to house her plant collection. And to be kind of a centerpiece for social gatherings.
Okay, so she was a plant lover and enjoyed having the public come and visit this place.
Yes.
So you're still living that tradition, right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that process of restoring it, because you really wanted to bring it back, right, to its glory. Tell us a little bit about that process and what you did with all the plants in here.
Yeah, so a lot of tender hands needed to be used to restore this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're in a big glass house, so you don't want to. You got to be very careful, right?
A little bit of a fragile thing.
You can break a few things.
Yeah.
So we identified the things that needed to be done, like fixing wood rot, fixing up the reflecting pond, buffing up the Narcissus statue. Replacing the shade cloth, and of course all the plants had to go somewhere during that time.
Right.
So not only did we have private funders help make this possible, but we had plant societies foster plants for a year while this work was done.
Okay, so of course the Garden Center houses a lot of plant societies, so now you're asking the plant societies to help foster some of the plants, and they obviously did great.
Yeah, the Tulsa Orchid Society and the Tulsa Cacti and Succulent Society took great care of the plants that we have.
That's awesome. And they're back in here now and
Yes.
enjoying their new environment. And so if people have not been here, tell us a little bit about what they might find. I know it goes from kind of dry to more of a humid environment.
Yeah, so we have 3 rooms in the conservatory. The middle room has the reflecting pond and the Narcissus statue. And on either side of that, the wings, we have the orchid collection. And then the other side is a little bit more dry, like you said, and that's the cacti and succulent. And some of those pieces in there are over 50 years old.
Oh, wow.
Huge.
Okay. And a very formal, symmetrical layout, and that kind of plays off the outside landscape as well.
Yes.
And so anybody can come visit this during open hours, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. The conservatory is open to the public. There's no fee to come and visit this space. It operates under different hours in the summer than it does the winter and fall.
All right.
So-
When you have a big birthday party sort of celebration, is that right, coming
We
up?
sure do, yeah. June 29th, we are celebrating big. We have 2 kind of parts to our celebrations. First is a public dedication celebration out in front of the conservatory from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, open to anyone and everyone.
Okay.
And then we'll move over into the mansion from 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock for Glasshouse Gold, which is a ticketed 1920s themed party.
All right, so bringing back the flapper dresses and stuff. Huh?
Very excited.
It sounds like a fun event. And if anybody wants to participate, can they still buy tickets to that?
Certainly, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, on our website, tulsagardencenter.org/glasshouse-gold.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Briana.
Thank you.
Today we are outside the teaching garden here at Woodward Park, and joining me is Andy Fusco. Andy, we always enjoy coming over here, and it looks like you've got some begonias to talk about today.
We sure do. We have 50 varieties of begonias. That's 50.
That's a lot of begonias.
Yeah. So this area is what we call our trial beds.
Okay.
So every year we work with our partners, Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, to trial. It's an informal trial, but different types of bedding plants. So every year it's something new. And this year it's begonias.
It's begonias, and I think we all know what a begonia is. We've heard of them. They come in white and pinks and reds, right? But who would have known there is actually so much variety in the bedding annual begonia, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's really cool about having them all right next to each other is you see them in the garden center or the big box store and you think, okay, that's a begonia and that's a begonia and that's a begonia. But here next to each other, you can really compare and contrast and find some cool varieties for your yard.
And they have some unique defining interests.
Yeah, they really do. So a lot of these it's a set of probably, I think, 10 or 15 series. So you've got some in the same series that are pink flowered or red flowered, but then you even have bronze or green foliage too. So you can really find what you're looking for.
So these are all full sun begonias, correct? Yes. And so again, 50 of them. Some of them have more of that angel wing type leaf. Some of them have just that round circular spoon shaped leaf.
Yeah, so some of them have the bigger leaves and the angel wing, that kind of half heart look of a wing. So that's some of your like houseplant style begonias. And then some of them are the little mounded begonias that a lot of us are used to putting in with our Joseph's coat or whatever. Okay. And then some of them are multi-flowered and some of them have some really tall, cool flowers. There's a variety that I really like. It's called Top Hat. And they've got some really big flowers on there.
Okay, so you can kind of step back and actually see which one's going to give you the biggest show.
Yeah, and then you can come right now. They've been planted, they've been in the ground for about a week or so, and then you can follow them along all summer long. And so come August, you know, we're going to do our best, but you might see that those actually didn't do as well for our Oklahoma summers, or those did great, and those really filled out really nicely.
Right, and that's what's so critical about this is they're right next to it. They're getting the same treatment, right? You're managing them like you would any of your other flowers here, I assume. And so hopefully we can come back in August and see really which ones are shining at that point.
Yeah, and they've all got their little name tags, so you can kind of make notes if you come along. It's not a formal trial. It's not randomized or anything like you would do at a university or anything. It's just really for the public to see, compare, and contrast the wide variety of bedding plants that we have.
But right here in the Oklahoma sun.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're getting the full treatment.
Okay, and this is outside of your fence, so anytime, basically,
yeah,
people could drive by.
It's in what we call Woodward Park proper, so anytime from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. you can come, stop by, check them out.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Andy, and we hope to check back with you about these begonias later in the season.
Yeah, come back and see us.
All right, thanks. Today we are back out here at the OSU Student Farm and we're finishing up the cool season harvest. And joining me is Matt Beartrack, one of the co-managers of the OSU Student Farm. This is a fun plant you've grown out here, Brussels sprouts, right?
Brussels sprouts, yep.
So tell me a little bit about this crop and how it does here in Oklahoma.
Well, not a lot of people know that Brussels sprouts do well in Oklahoma. It's kind of a tough crop. It's really a longer season than most of your brassicas because it is part of the cabbage family.
Yeah, it's actually related to
Yeah, it's related to
cabbage, broccoli,
cabbage,
all of those.
Broccoli, everything, all that.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of those are about 70 days, 70, 80 days. And not only is it longer season, it takes, higher nitrogen.
Okay.
And there's a little more work to it. There's a little bit of pruning you got to do throughout the season. And, with Oklahoma's weather, it's kind of unpredictable weather. Really, it's a good, end of winter, into the first of summer, and hopefully, the weather cooperates enough to where you can get a good harvest out of it.
So we've had a nice wet, early start to the summer, I would say. So basically, when did you plant these?
We planted these in the 1st of February.
Okay.
And, we try to push them with urea throughout the season, kind of push them hard because they can take up to, anywhere from 175 to, almost 200 pounds of nitrogen per acre.
Because you're really after the vegetation on this.
And it's mostly green vegetation, so
Right.
that's what they really focus on.
Okay.
Is nitrogen.
Okay.
And we did have them covered. When we first put them out, we waited a few weeks, and then we went ahead and covered them to keep them protected,
Right.
keep pushing them along, so they don't have any of those little peaks and valleys where they go slow and then they go fast. So
Gotcha.
So just keep it uniform.
Okay. So we've got a little bit of a late start one here. Can you tell us a little bit, walk us through the season of some of the maintenance that might need to be done on this one?
So this is kind of how they look whenever you first plant them and they get to growing. So we'll generally wait till they get about this tall, about 18 to 24 inches. And then what we'll do is come in and clip these tops off.
Okay.
So we'll totally remove that top, and then we'll come down and start pulling off anywhere from half to 2/3 of the leaves. And what that'll do, clipping that top off, will help promote these the Brussels sprouts actually grow.
So that's them right there.
That's
those
them right there,
buds.
the beginnings of them. So clipping that top and taking those leaves off will actually help promote these Brussels sprouts to grow a little more uniform and to get a little more size to them.
All right. And then next to you, we have one that's ready to harvest. Is that correct?
We have one ready to harvest here, and we like to use either loppers or something, a little heavier duty because they are thick stem.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's basically your finished product.
So all of these little buds have continued to grow.
And they'll get tight throughout the season. Sometimes when you're checking them, you can feel that they'll be loose inside, kind of like a head of cabbage. And then when they get a little more mature, they'll be nice and tight like you'd find in the store.
Okay. So what does topping and pruning those leaves off kind of do for this plant?
It just helps to promote these to get sized up and to get a little more uniformity to them.
Okay.
Because if we don't top them, some of the ones at the bottom tend to stay big, and the ones towards the top, where all the hormones would be located, they stay a little smaller, kind of like that one.
Okay. And so basically anybody who's not familiar with Brussels sprouts, this is what we're after
That's
right
what we're
here.
after, yep.
And so you guys are just harvesting these stems as is and taking them to our daily
Yep.
bread?
We just harvest the whole stem and figured it's a little easier to display them and transport them.
Okay, all right. And as far as just, what it's returning back to the ground, they have a sizable root back in the ground, right?
Yeah,
So,
they're basically like little trees. So they do put a lot of organic matter, and the leaves, we'll leave the leaves on the row, and we'll incorporate those back in too.
all right. So this, you've harvested once, it looks like?
Yeah, we had one big harvest on Friday, and here it is Monday, and we were just kind of letting the rest of them size back up and see if we can get one more little harvest.
So
out
they
of them.
should be done by mid-June is where we're...
Yeah, probably. If not, we don't harvest the rest this week. Next week for sure they'll be out of there.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing this unique crop with us, Matt.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be making some easy ground beef zucchini boats. So if you have an abundance of zucchini in your garden, this will be a great recipe to use up some of that zucchini. You can also, if you don't have zucchini, you could also use squash, like this yellow squash. This would work just as well. If you do have, like the squash or crookneck squash, it's a little bit more difficult to cut, make the boats through the neck, but you can still use these. I have 6 medium-sized zucchini squash that are all similar in size, so that's what I'm going to use for this recipe. Now you'd want to start, first wash your hands, then you'd want to make sure that you wash the zucchini using a vegetable brush. You'd want to make sure that you scrub the squash, the outside, to make sure that you get all the dirt or anything else that might be stuck on that exterior skin. After your squash are all washed, then you can go ahead and start cutting them in half. Now you can, if you'd like, you can cut the ends off of the squash, but you don't have to. I kind of like to leave those on because I feel like it holds the zucchini together a little bit better when you start scooping and also when they're cooking. But you can remove that if you'd like. But we're just going to take a spoon. We're going to cut them in half lengthwise, then take a spoon, and we're just going to use that to kind of scoop out the seeds. And we will use the seeds in a little while for the recipe when we make the filling. So we're going to put that in a bowl to save that for later. So some of these are kind of more difficult to scoop. If you have like a melon baller or a grapefruit spoon, it might make it a little bit easier, but I'm just using a regular tablespoon for this. And then as we finish with our scooping out our very last of our zucchini, remember we're still going to use the inside part of the zucchini to make the filling. So after we get all of this scooped out and in our bowl, then we'll need to chop all that up. So to chop it, we'll just lay all that back on the cutting board, and if you don't want to chop it back up, you really don't even have to. It's just going to make it better, like the filling is going to be more evenly. And there's no perfect size or shape to have for the filling. You just want it to be small enough, so probably that it's a little closer to size of your onions that are going to be in the pan. And we will just add that back in the bowl, and then we'll have to set it aside for just a few minutes. And once you get all of your zucchini chopped, then we'll move over here and we'll start heating our pan. So we're going to use 1 tablespoon of olive oil added to our skillet, which is turned up to about medium-high heat. And we're using olive oil. Olive oil is probably my favorite oil. It's it's a neutral flavor and it's heart healthy. So I like to use it with just about everything, but you could use another oil if you have your favorite oil. We're just going to let that get a little bit hot. Then we'll add our onions. And I'm using one small white onion. You could also use a yellow onion if you had a yellow onion and wanted to use that. And we're going to cook our onion until until it's softened. Okay, now those look like they have softened, so we are going to go ahead and add our ground beef. I'm using a lean ground beef for this recipe. You could also use a ground pork or ground turkey if you'd prefer to use that. Or you could even use half ground beef and half pork or turkey. I've even tried this recipe with a plant-based meat substitute and it turned out really well. So once we've added our ground beef, we're going to want to let that cook until it's browned. Okay, once the ground beef has browned, if you're using a very fatty ground beef, at this point you'll want to drain some of the grease from the pan. Since I'm using a really lean ground beef, it really doesn't have anything to drain. which is good, but we will go ahead then and start adding our spices. So the first thing we'll add is we've got 1 teaspoon of oregano, a 1/2 teaspoon garlic powder. If you had fresh minced garlic, you could also use that. I'm just using the garlic powder. And then we've got a 1/2 teaspoon of salt and just black pepper to taste. And then we'll mix that in with our ground beef. And then we'll add our tomato paste. We're using 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. And 1 can of tomato sauce. And now you can use no salt added tomato sauce. And if you could just maybe adjust how much salt or spices that you add. Once we get the tomato sauce mixed in, then we're going to add back our chopped zucchini. So all that zucchini that we chopped up, we'll add it back in to our boats. And then at this point, we're just going to let it simmer for about 10 minutes. Now that our mixture has simmered for about 10 minutes, we'll go ahead and turn off the heat, and we'll start adding the mixture to our boats. So for this, I'm just going to use a regular spoon, same spoon that I used to scoop out the zucchini, but we'll just fill all this back into our boats. Okay, and once all of your boats are full, and it's okay if some of them spill over because that's what that parchment paper is for, to make it easier to clean up. But we'll add these to our oven, which has been preheated to 360 degrees. We're going to leave these in the oven for about 20 minutes. It's been about 20 minutes, so we're taking the zucchini back out of the oven and we'll add our cheese. Now I'm using mozzarella cheese. You could use a different kind of cheese if you wanted, but we're just going to add this onto the top of each of our boats, and then it will go back in the oven just to let the cheese melt. Now that the cheese is melted, these are ready to serve. So these zucchini boats, they have, you've got your vegetables, protein, and dairy. So it really could be a complete meal like it is, but if you wanted to serve it alongside with some pasta or rice to add grains, you could do that as well. But we are just going to add a little bit of some fresh parsley. And there we go. That is the ground beef stuffed zucchini boats.
For this recipe and more like it, scan this QR code. There are a lot of great horticulture activities this time of year. Be sure and consider some of these events in the weeks ahead. Next week on Oklahoma Gardening, we're highlighting how gardening is for everyone. Today we're here outside the Learning Garden. To find out more information about show topics as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure to visit our website at oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. Join in on Facebook and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. Tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater gem. We would like to thank our generous underwriters, the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, and Shape Your Future, a program of the Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust. Additional support is also provided by Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, the Oklahoma Horticulture Society, the Tulsa Garden Club, and the Tulsa Garden Center.